This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, and I am here with the amazing Morgana McCabe Allan. Morgana, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Morgana, can you tell us just a little bit about your background and about what you've studied in your area of expertise?
Sure. So I did my PhD several years ago now on how our identity and reality are co-created through all the relationships that we participate in with people, places, things, ideas, social constructs, non-corporeal entities, energies, and all kinds of other things, and how the overall frequency of that network in a culture or in the life of an individual manifest specific patterns of experience and very often trauma. It can also be healing. And I've gone on to use that to work in entrepreneurship to support entrepreneurs.
Wow. Okay, so if you were going to break that down at the 101 level and explain that to someone who didn't have the PhD background, how would you explain that to an entrepreneur who is looking for some assistance with their business?
So what I would say is that our reality is directly relational to the things that we engage with. So just think about it this way, right? If I have an old computer with broken keys, then I don't know what I'm typing all the time. I probably make a lot of typos I send people. I can't be bothered replying to messages. I have to work really slowly if I'm trying to be careful and get things correct. So my business goes very, very slowly. If I make my business in relationship with a brand new computer that's really easy to use, that has voice recognition software, so I can just speak directly to it, it can work so much faster, then my potential automatically increases just through that one relationship. And if you amplify that across everything we interact with, if I am interacting with a partner that's really great for me versus a partner who is trying to hold me back, if I have a positive relationship with my kids versus if I'm never getting any sleep and I'm fighting with them, if I feel like the whole universe is against me and nobody supports me versus if I feel like, there is an entire universe full of energy that's flowing into me and supporting me, then the reality that I'll create will be very different. And it's all about the things that we actually choose to be in relationship with. And as our culture is set up, most of the time we don't even realize we have a choice. We interact with exactly what's put out in front of us. Like if you remember being a kid and you get your dinner from your mom, you eat what you get and you don't get upset. You're not allowed to say, I didn't want that today. And so we go through our lives thinking, well, I've got what I've got and I just have to make do with it. And we don't realize the extent to which we can actually change what we're interacting with and also how we interact with it.
So let's dig a little bit more into that because I know that you have a background in archaeology. So let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about past cultures and their ideas about the creation of reality and relational things around them. And if you would talk just a little bit about how, you feel like Western culture may have lost that idea and, just kind of how we got where we are now.
Oh, of course. So one of the things that I'd really like to start with is animism, because a great many past cultures and also some contemporary ones live in a world where everything is imbued with an energy of life. Everything has value and is part of a universe of consciousness of some description. And so there is a level of respect and co-creation with other kinds of beings. And when I say beings, tree beings or stone beings, not just animal beings. And then at the far end of it, where we are now, we've gotten to a point now in contemporary culture where we struggle to even actually see the humanity in other humans. And as a result, our relationships are very shallow on respect, very, very shallow on reciprocity, very exploitative, and our world feels very empty. And so we exploit the world. We feel like, well, we can use any resources, we can use them to any excess, because there's no sense of life force being present in the things that we're using. We're just essentially mindlessly consuming. And that's actually very negative for us as individual beings, for culture as a whole, and for the world.
Fascinating. So then basically at a super high level, what you're saying is that because mankind has lost their connection to nature and understanding, basically the life force and the value that is in, every single form of life, that we have reduced our relationships, not only with the world, but with each other, down to kind of a transactional level. And that level of transactional activity is what has kind of polluted the, basically the interactions of life as well as the quality of life for everyone. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time we put a seed out there, others spread the same seed. If you sort of think like a dandelion, when you blow the dandelion and the seeds all fly out, if we put out an intention, a word, a reality, an action that says, I don't respect you very much, I want to just take what you have, people catch those little seeds and they feel like, I don't feel very respected. Everybody wants to take what I have. I need to get more so that I've definitely got enough. And then they go out and think, I need to get more. I want to feel respected. I deserve to be respected. And they propagate the same thing. And you see that, if we look at the witch trials and we look at how that fear spreads, and it spread from one accusation in one village would become accusations in a number of villages, would become a panic across the country. We can see that the negative thoughts, beliefs, patterns that we participate in are propagated very easily from an individual to a group to a culture.
Wow. So I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I want to ask you this question, and it's a little provocative, so bear with me here. Are you paralleling the spreading of negativity as well as the spreading of greed with kind of the same phobia that propagated the witch trials? I just want to make sure that I'm kind of seeing that pattern, because that's kind of where my brain is going. And I just wanted to see kind of exactly where you were going with that. If you could just get a little bit more into that detail, because that's really fascinating.
So not necessarily in terms of magical belief. I'm not saying that it's actually secretly people believe in witchcraft and that's why this
Oh,
happens. Not
oh
at
no,
all. But rather that any emotion. So let's use, for example, shame this time, right?
that's a
When
good one, because a lot of
when
people have that.
when somebody is in shame, when our shame is triggered, the very first thing that we go out and do is shame somebody else, because we don't want to feel our shame. We want to project it out. We want to find somebody else to situate that on. And so we behave very badly. And shame has physical symptoms, which includes all kinds of toxic behaviors against ourselves, including self-harm and drug abuse, alcohol abuse, things like that, but also sabotaging our relationships and being hurtful and harmful towards the others around about us. And so then they're triggered in their shame and they go out and trigger somebody else's shame. Exact same thing you think about anger. If I'm really angry and I'm triggered and I'm just looking for a fight and I come on here and I'm like ranting and raving about something, even if you're not angry about the same subject as me, even if I am not angry at you, you later will be more angry and that anger will dispel itself somewhere in your life and propagate forward. And that's not just something that happens in the interaction between people. I want to be really clear about that because this is the part that gets missed. It's not just emotions direct from one person to another in a transfer that then propagates out. The things that we create, the physical manifestations of our emotions in the world, are imbued with that frequency and they spread that too. So we understand what's called the weapons effect, which is the effect that people have around about violent implements. And so if you take, for example, the research that was done with guns, take one actor and one real participant, right? And the actor's job is to irritate the real participant before the experiment actually starts. And the research that is left on the table either badminton rackets, shuttlecocks, or guns. And then the researcher comes in, it's like, so sorry guys, that's from another experiment, don't mind that, and takes it away. And they continue on, and they forget probably that they even saw it. It wasn't meant for them, it's just in the corner of the room, no big deal, right? Now you go into the experiment, and the true participant is meant to apply an electric shock to the actor. Now, of course, they're an actor, they're acting like they got an electric shock, but the participant doesn't know that. The participant that had the shuttlecock and the badminton rackets are much more likely to refuse to administer the shock or to administer very low shock. The ones that were around about the guns, much more likely to crank it right up. Another
Really?
example, another example of this, white vans with a camera on the back. and a picture of a gun or just a plain back and just driving around town, right? The ones with a gun on them are much more likely to record road rage on their camera than the ones with no gun on them. Because even though people don't even know they saw it, like they're just concentrating on their driving, like they're just doing what they're doing. They don't even know it. They probably just saw it at the corner of their eye, but it elevates a stress response inside of us because we know it's a danger. Just the same way you would know it's a danger if there was a tiger in the corner of the room right now. And so it is not just other people that we're in a direct response, a direct relationship with. It's the physical things. It's the feeling of places. So another one, the broken window effect.
Wow.
Where there is graffiti and broken glass and stuff around about in the street, people are much more likely to commit small and also major crimes compared to the exact same street if that same street is all like tidied up and nice. And they've done experiments with that where they've intentionally left a handbag or a purse, and they've just scattered some litter and glass and stuff like that about, and people are much more likely to take the handbag. But if it looks like a really nice neighborhood, people are much less likely to take it. So that's just another example of how we are actually in relationship all of the time, not just with the people around about us and the actual words that they are saying, but the energetic vibration of the physical things that because they embody the intention with which they were created. And that feeds back into a loop as well, as does culture and all these other things. They're all folding in and compounding the impact and spreading it bigger. They amplify and increase the speed at which something is transmitted across a culture.
That's fascinating. So let's back up one question because I'm probably opening a can of worms with this, and I'm totally cognizant of that. But let's talk about shame for a second. Is there ever a time that shame is actually healthy for a person?
That's a very hard question. I would
Like I
say,
said, I knew I was opening a can of worms.
so I would say that we have evolved to have shame for a reason, but the question is whether or not those reasons are relevant now. So shame is part of a very ancient part of the brain, and it helps us to stay in the middle of the herd so that we don't wind up being the one that's out in the cold, getting dead all by ourselves because nobody likes us anymore. So there is a function to it. It allows us to be able to live in groups, and other social species experience something akin to shame. Obviously, we can't say for sure exactly if it's exactly the same for them because we can't experience it through their bodies of beings and ways of interacting. So there is a purpose, a reason why shame has come into existence. However, in today's modern world, where there is so much capacity to build and to rebuild and to connect, and where we can also recognize that, belonging with these people might not be good for me. Like belonging with people that shame me all the time is not actually good for me. If I find belonging with people that accept me for who I really am, I will have a much more incredible life. So in this context where we can actually ask questions for ourselves and have the opportunity to move into a different social group, the opportunity, it's not the case that if I leave my little pack, I will be instantly dead from all the wolves and lions and the cold and all the rest of it. Then is shame good for us in this contemporary world that we are in now? It's hard to see how it could be.
What about in terms of societal boundaries and respect to other people? For example, thinking about that whole idea of freedom up to the point that, you're doing something to harm another person.
So that's a
How do you,
different, yeah,
how do you see those two things as connected, or how do you see them as not connected?
So there's a difference between shame and guilt, because shame is I am not worthy, I am not enough. It's these kind of things. And so shame doesn't actually empower us to make reparations. Shame actually, like I said, is physical consequences that push us into actually participating in more negative behavior and compounding our own negative experience and the negative experience of others. Guilt is quite different. Guilt is a much newer part of the brain, and guilt can be reasoned and rationalized with. And so you can, guilt is healthy and useful in the context of the kind of thing that you're talking about, because if you do make an infraction upon another person, you can think, oh, that can't have felt very nice for them. I'm sorry that I did that. I would like to fix that for them. I can go and take these steps in order to create reparation, which is a completely different and much more empowered place to be sitting in, compared to being seated in that place of I'm worthless, I'm useless, I can't do anything right. Because how are you going to fix anything from that energy?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that totally makes sense. Um, Perfect. That's very, very helpful. So the whole reason that, we are here today is to talk about overcoming things. Obviously this is a very trying time, for everyone, I think, with COVID and the current, political craziness going on and just world craziness in general. So what would you say that you have overcome that has been really hard for you, number one? And number two, what would be your advice to someone if they're going through something, and what would the steps be that you would put out there for them to overcome that particular thing, both as a person and also as an entrepreneur? Sorry, these were two very long questions.
Okay, so I mean, that's a question of kind of like how long have you got in terms of what have I overcome? I have very serious allergies and spent a great deal of my childhood very ill, and as a result spent an awful lot of time at home, which cannot have been easy for my parents. If you add it up, I missed 6 years of school in total. I one day sat down and calculated that, looking at all my absences over the years. And quite possibly in relationship with that, because I was ill a lot and therefore I was uncomfortable and upset a lot and stuff. My parents used to be very quick to put me away if I was sad or something. So just get shut in a room until I had a happy face. Don't come out until you have a happy face. And so as a result, I learned to keep all my negative feelings hidden. And over time, as a consequence of generational trauma that's present in my family, which I've also had to work to overcome, abusers came into my life in a sort of succession that was extremely negative for me. My later childhood and early teens particularly, were dominated by that and by some really severe mental health issues, including eating disorder and depression, suicidal ideation. And I came into my 20s with the feeling that I really had to turn things around, or there was no point in continuing forwards. And this will sound like a very strange path to your hero's journey. It's a very strange turn, but I became a stripper, and that was actually incredibly empowering for me. It was a way for me to take back a level of control, to find out who I was, to get to know my body in a new way, and also a place where I could master high ticket sales and create real income for myself for the first time. So to put in context the before and after, in my late teens, I was working in a shop alongside guys who were really quite, they sexually harassed me a lot, and I was earning about 8,000 a year. And when I left, I became a stripper where I commanded a great deal of respect and could earn more like 1,000 easily in a weekend or more. So it was a huge shift in my reality, and it opened my mind up to what was possible. Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't one and done. I then had another series of like low dips and comebacks, ultimately leading me back into academia and throughout many years of academia, and then into entrepreneurship with a number of businesses alongside all of that. And in terms of the steps that I would say, like what I was doing and why I did it, why I went and became a stripper, and advice that I give all of my clients is that we have to understand what we admire. We have to understand what we value. We have to understand what calls to us, because it represents a part of ourselves that we have cut off in order to be able to feel safe or fit in. So in order to have really simple feeling of safety or belonging, that we have discarded something valuable in ourselves. And so I recognized that from a really young age. Even when I was really ill, I used to make these lists of actually mostly Star Trek characters when I was young, because it was the only thing I was allowed to watch. And I would make these lists of the characters and the things that I admired about them, and I would like look at those lists a lot and sort of curate them. And I came to realize much later that that is actually a tool that's used in psychotherapy, and it is a way of understanding the parts of ourselves that we have projected out. So, you know, the parts that where we're feeling a lack of congruence with who and what we are in the here and now and what we know we can be, then the temptation is then to project that out onto others. And so when we realize that the reason that we admire that incredible level of truth telling in Wonder Woman, or the reason that we admire that great physical strength, or the reason that we admire that academic prowess or whatever it is because we identify with it. There's a part of us that knows that it's meant for us. And so that's one of the things that I really invite people to do when we're in the process of overcoming something, is not to try and overcome it from who we are now, where we are now, because we were the co-creator of this circumstance, and we're already imbued with all of the beliefs that make it heavy and hold us in it. But rather to try and overcome it from that person that a deep part of you knows that you can be, that the person that you see in other people. You know, when you see those great qualities in other people and you think, I would love to be like that, is to actually intentionally attach your identity onto that, and then to take very practical steps with material culture, with the way that we interact with places, with people, with ideas, with social constructs, with all the rest of it that are congruent with that quality we admire.
Interesting. And so, you know, how would you mention, you know, and how would you suggest that people go about kind of redefining themselves in that way? You know, I guess what I would say, I mean, and you just gave some, you know, practical pieces of advice, but at the same time, let's say somebody is going through a slump right now and they are trying to take aggressive action to kind of get them out of that slump. You know, what would be some practical steps that people could, you know, kind of do that would get them kind of on the short path to some, you know, low hanging fruit and some quick wins?
Yeah. So, like I just said, make a list of a few people. I strongly suggest fictional characters, because when you do it with real people, there's always the possibility that some scandal comes out and they massively disappoint you and stuff. Whereas if you use characters, they're contained. They're inside a limited world. That's not going to happen, right? And even maybe the author comes along and writes another book, but you can just say, that was rubbish.
That's fabulous. Actually, I never even thought about that. How if you have a hero who is a fictional character versus a hero who's a real person that never, you know, puts you at risk of having to worry about whatever could come out of the closet 10 years from now or 20 years from now. That's pretty
Yeah,
fascinating.
absolutely. It's really important that we're intentional about how we construct our identity. And so I'm going to use the example of Moana. One of my clients last year, Moana was one of the characters that she picks because she
Mhm.
really identified with that desire for freedom and desire to do things a different way and to be in a role of female leadership that she defined rather than doing things the masculine way, and you know all these other things, right? And so what we would do in that circumstance is to actually begin to think quite intentionally about how can you bring things into your everyday life that really support and uplift your feeling of attachment to those qualities through a shared identity. So things like a seashell necklace, or just like a little physical piece, like a little physical thing that you can use, that you can that can be a touch point for that new quality. And so every time you look in the mirror, you're kind of reminding yourself of that. And also you can create mantras around about it. I am free, I am an explorer, I am a great leader, or something like that. But there are lots of ways you want to bring in every different aspect of how you do being in the world. So another thing that I would maybe suggest to somebody, again on the Moana front, would be go and take up sailing. Like if you want to feel freedom because you see that in her and you respect it and you admire it, go and try the actual sailing. And maybe sailing's not for you, but then try something else. But actually get your body involved, your heart involved, your mind involved, your whole being involved. Bring it into the way you are actually out in the landscape, bring it into the physical material culture that you're interacting with, and make a practice around about it, like I said, morning mantras or something, so that you're very actively every day you're saying, I commit to move towards that feeling of freedom and that explorer personality that I desire to hold.
That's really fascinating. And also, you know, I think everybody thinks about it in like this context, right? They think about a tiny piece of it. Like they think, I'm going to do affirmations, or they think, I'm going to go do this tiny thing and then all of this change is going to happen. But what you're actually proposing is not just change in the mental plane, it's actually change in the physical plane too, and
Yeah,
really manifesting, an entire new existence. Because, like, for example, if someone wants to feel more free, like we were talking about, taking up sailing, going to take those classes instead of just, I don't know, sitting and listening to, affirmations about, I want to be a sailor, I am free, whatever, because that
Yeah.
doesn't actually make it happen in the physical world. And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
here's a
Um,
question for you, if you don't mind me asking, because this is actually something that I've been really curious about. I'm sure, neuro-linguistic programming, of course, has been all the rage for many, many years. And, obviously, for people who are not familiar, and I'm going to probably butcher this, so please correct me if I get this wrong in any way, shape, or form, because you are the expert here, Morgana, not me. So basically, the brain has a hard time telling what is a real physical experience versus what is simply, experienced in the brain. And so a lot of coaches and therapists and things like that have started utilizing NLP as a way to kind of reprogram and kind of re-experience, certain aspects of things that have happened in the past. My question to you is, what do you think about that? And do you think that it's necessary if someone is dealing, for example, with some kind of a trauma? Do you think that it's necessary for them to manifest a physical aspect of it as well and to kind of go through that process in addition to dealing with something that they're just recreating in their brain? What do you think the link is, and how much truth do you think there is to that whole concept?
I mean, one of the things to recognize is that neuro-linguistic programming was taking the very best of what was available in positive psychology at the time and bundling it all up into one thing. So I don't think we can really question whether or not it works or it's valuable, but we can question whether or not it's complete in and of itself and whether or not it has downsides. One of the downsides is that if we are affirming and visualizing, I'm a winner all the time, there actually can be the point that people don't take action because they already feel they embody it so much that, like, I've already got the reward of feeling like I'm a winner, so I don't need to take the action, so to speak. And so you can do all of these affirmations but not actually create the real change. And so I'm very interested in seeing how people work holistically. Another thing is that we experience different states of consciousness through different ways of being. And so if we're focusing entirely on one modality like neuro-linguistic programming, we're not actually necessarily allowing ourselves to enter into the higher states of consciousness that are available to us through other modalities that can actually give us these incredible moments of inspiration and help us to find our real path. And so we really want to think about how we can explore states that are in the mind body, that are in the connection between body and heart, between heart and mind, and to really, look at all the different aspects of yourself very holistically.
Wow.
Another thing that I would say, just to sort of wrap that one up, is that the fastest possible way to create transformation is to include the body in the work, because all emotion, all thought, all of that is embodied, and it becomes long after we've forgotten what the emotion was, long after we've forgotten what the thought was, it becomes part of our body state, and we know that it can come out as health consequences. And one really quick story I can share about that is that when I got engaged the first time to my first husband, I developed eczema underneath my engagement ring immediately, like the next day, and it was a really high quality, like 24 karat gold white gold, 24 karat white gold. It shouldn't have been an allergen, and I've worn other like cheap rings and things before, and over the course of my engagement it spread right up my arm and then right over my body until it was even on my eyelids on the day that I got married. And when I filed for divorce a bit over a year later, the eczema disappeared almost overnight. So
Wow.
we know the emotions and the thoughts and the relationship between thoughts and emotions, beliefs, feeds into our body state. So if you're only just working on the thought level, then even although you can transform the thoughts at that level and you can begin to take new actions and things like that, there's a lot that's still being left behind in the body that needs to be dealt with, and for which there will be reckoning. And so I really truly believe that it's when we work holistically and that we recognize that we are embodied beings situated here in a sort of an interdimensional environment, and when we work on all of these different dimensions rather than just one aspect, that we have the greatest potential for transformation.
Fascinating. So let me ask you about one last thing, and then, I'd like to ask you to give everyone some general advice. So the one thing I wanted to ask you about is toxic positivity. That's something that has been a really, really hot button topic recently. I mean, obviously, there's all kinds of, manifestation out there. And I mean, there's all kinds of coaches out there that are, kind of leading to just, I guess you would say, great levels of manifestation, but it doesn't seem like there's any kind of, I don't know if the word is conscience behind it, for
Mhm.
lack of a better word. It's like, I want to manifest this money. I want to manifest this money. I want to manifest this money. But there's no, I want to manifest this money because, and this is what the balance is going to be by me having this new thing. If you would please talk a little bit about if you think that, toxic positivity exists. And
So,
also, if you don't mind me asking, here's another question. Can that actually lead to any kind of sociopathy?
okay, so they're two very big, very different questions. I'm going to start with the first one first. Toxic
Awesome.
positivity absolutely exists, and it is incredibly, incredibly toxic. And one of the areas that we see it the most is the manifestation industry, the personal development industry are extremely, I would say, bad for saying things like, you're responsible for your thoughts. You get the world that you think into existence. You need to take control of your thoughts. And you've heard these kind of things before, right? But
Mm-hmm.
what it doesn't account for is the fact that we don't all have equal responsibility. We don't all have equal capacity because we don't live inside a cultural system where everything is completely fair and equal in the first place, right? So yes, absolutely, a white, reasonably well-to-do, middle class, probably middle-aged man, he has got a huge amount of agency. His thoughts, like he can manifest them really rather rapidly, right? But like if we look at somebody that's in an intersectional space, like maybe let's look at a bisexual black single mother, for
Mm-hmm.
example, her capacity to have the thoughts that that man has, there's no way. They're living in two completely different worlds. He can't have the thoughts that she has, and she can't have the thoughts that he has, right? So therefore, they cannot possibly both think the same reality into existence. That guy that went to Harvard can think one reality into existence, absolutely, but somebody else in a different circumstance, they cannot think that reality into existence. And the reason for that is that our thoughts are not actually our own. Our thoughts are emergent from that network that we participate in. And most of that network is not something that we've chosen, it's something that we're born into. So if you're born into an athlete and a male body and an affluent lifestyle, your identity is automatically connected with all of these culturally high value assets, and they feed you thoughts about what is possible for you, and they support your emotional state, and they lift you up in the world, right? And if you're born into a really, a really poor area in a poor town, and you have maybe just one parent earning, maybe it's a single parent family, and you don't have the role models, you certainly don't have the connections, you don't have the educational opportunities, not to mention the fact that if we look at, even just if we look at race politics for a minute, the entire medical industry supports white bodies. The research is done to promote the optimal health of white bodies. The educational system is set up for a white success and to prioritize the subjects that white people will be interested in, and so on and so on and so on, right? And so the thoughts that we can have are not, they're culturally emergent, and we are conditioned into them, and we cannot be held responsible for those thoughts until we have been educated to the possibility of having other thoughts, and we don't all have equal access to that education. So when people come into, for example, the online space and they're being told, you get the reality you think, that is incredibly toxic. And it's also, it can really trigger people. It can trigger people into their shame, and trigger people into their pain. It can have people feeling like, what, why am I being held responsible for my partner's death? Or what, like, is it, with me thinking about it, what happened? That's not fair. Why am I being held responsible for my child's drug addiction? Like, How can I be responsible for that? These kind of things, and that shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't be putting people in that place is the number one thing, right? In terms of your second part of your question, which was about, is that kind of manifesting like ethical, can it lead to some kind of sociopathy or something like that? That kind of manifesting, to me, is really abhorrent, but people always will get their comeuppance in a sense, because what happens is that, yes, you can manifest anything. Manifesting is very much like about your intention and your desire and the extent that you just show up and make it happen and all the rest of it. So you can have really bad intentions and still manifest £1,000,000 or whatever, but it will not feel the same. And so what I've seen with people is that even very good people, but they weren't actually aligned with what they were doing, is that they can manifest a 7 or an 8-figure business or whatever, but not feel abundant on the inside, not feel good on the inside, be hiding their wealth from people because they don't feel like they will be accepted, be feeling like they've got to make incredibly expensive purchases just to fit in, even though they didn't even want that thing or whatever. Like, if you have manifested from a toxic energy, the things that you create will feel toxic to you. They'll be toxic in your life. Like you will not feel that incredible joy and abundance and freedom and spiritual wholeness that you would feel. Whereas if you manifest the way that I guide people to manifest, is that we manifest who we want to become. We manifest from being. That is all, whatever you totally match by being the perfect match for it can come into your reality very easily. And when we manifest that way, it's always led by being first. Then for you to manifest these incredible things, you have to manifest yourself into that incredible person. You have to deliver incredible gifts into the world. And that's a truly beautiful and purposeful thing that serves others. The consequence is that when you manifest the rewards for that, it feels amazing. It feels like, and it feels fantastic. And you understand that it came to you for a reason, rather than thinking, people will find out I'm an imposter, they're going to steal like all my ideas and all of that kind of stuff. You will know that you are a perpetual generator of ideas. You will know that you can always create success again. You will know that your success belongs to you, and so on.
Gotcha. And, what general advice do you have for everyone, for anyone who's feeling stuck or anyone who's feeling like a rut, kind of right now in the pandemic?
The very best question I could ask anybody to ask themselves is, who do I want to be? Not what do I want to do, and not what do I want to have. Absolutely ask, what do I want to feel? Because feeling and being are incredibly intimately connected.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I want to be? What do I want to feel? And that's why we say, when our emotions, you can say, I am happy or I feel happy. I am excited or I feel excited, right? But you wouldn't say, I am a car or I have a car, right?
No,
Or
no, I've never been a car. Have you?
so you want to think, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a teacher? Do you want to be filled with enthusiasm? Like, how do you want to serve in a general sense? Not, I want to be, not like, I want to be teaching entrepreneurs how to grow their Instagram, and I want to have 10,000 of them in my program. Not that, but rather, I want to teach because I am a teacher, because my spirit is the spirit of a teacher. And then I want to feel joy and freedom and ease, and to think about those things, and then basically think very carefully. Imagine it's like a compass. You can shut your eyes and just try and feel for that feeling, like the compass needle. Where is there joy, freedom, and ease right now? Like, where can I get some joy or some freedom or some ease? Where can I call in an opportunity to embody being a teacher? And you know what? I find most people, they're not far off, but they are off at the same time. Like, they might have identified, for example, that they want to be a writer, but they're probably not writing about the right thing, or they're probably not writing in relationship with the right person. They're not writing their work to the right person, because we get a certain amount of awareness and we think that's as good as it can feel, and we don't realize that every tiny degree that you get closer to being like pointing to your true north, the better and better and better it feels.
Awesome. Well, this has been amazing. Any last parting words of wisdom that you have here?
Okay, my last parting words would be to embrace the philosophy of equanimity. This is one of the things that holds people back so much, is that we are so quick to make ourselves only as good as our last success or our last failure, and to get completely wrapped up in that, and to embody it. To, I am a failure. Today I'm a success, but as soon as that success is gone, I'm a failure. And I've been there. I mean, I finished my master's degree. I passed with one of the highest passes that the university has ever awarded anybody in any department. And I started my PhD like the next day. So I finished on a Friday, started on a Monday, didn't feel anything. No sense of accomplishment, no sense of achievement. It was already behind me. It was done. Like I needed the next thing to feel good again. Obviously, I've grown and moved on a great deal since then. But that if we can detach making ourselves in relationship with our success or failures and just see them all as lessons, every failure is a blessing and a lesson. Every success is a blessing and a lesson, but we don't hook our identity too much onto either one. We just allow them to be like, it's water in a river that's just kind of flowing by, and we don't try and like hook our anchor directly onto the water, because the water you can't do that. What, like, you can't hook anything onto water. Water's just flowing past you. Just let yourself be okay with, sometimes it will be good, sometimes it will not be great. It doesn't say anything about me. I'm still special, I'm still important, I still have a great gift, I'm still magical, I'm still meant to be here, I'm still meant to do this. People need me. Allow yourself to hold those beliefs regardless of what happens in the moment, on the positive or the negative.
Awesome. I think you and I need to talk about a part two, because there's still so much that I want to cover, but unfortunately we have a hard stop. Thank you so much for your time. It was amazing.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.